Hello everyone, welcome back to Ace Wisdom. You want to know what really lights a fire under an avoidant ex? Seeing you with someone else, not when you're crying, not when you're spiraling, not when you're desperately posting stories to get their attention, but when you're calm, when you're centered, when you're dressed to kill and smiling across a table with someone new, and they know it's not them. That's when their stomach drops. That's when the silence they once controlled becomes their own mental torture chamber. That's when they realize you weren't bluffing. Welcome back, family. And if this is your first time here, welcome to the realest breakup series on the internet. This is Volume 5, Episode 32 of our unapologetically raw, no-fluff breakdown on avoidant attachment and emotional transformation. Today's video: 5 things that happen when your avoidant ex sees you dating again. If you've been rocking with us from the early days, back when you were still replaying messages, analyzing ghosting patterns, questioning your worth, and praying they'd come back, I just want to say thank you. You didn't just survive their withdrawal. You didn't just endure the distance. You woke up. And now, you're not just healing, you're evolving. Every volume, every episode has been building you up to this point, not just to understand their behavior, but to reclaim your energy, your confidence, and your standards. And if you've made it this far, you already know, this series doesn't exist to shame avoidance. It exists to liberate the ones they leave behind. Because avoidants don't always leave physically, most of the time they just disappear emotionally, long before the relationship even ends. And that silence you got used to? That emotional starvation they forced you to accept? It changes you. It forces you to confront the ugliest question: was I not enough? But here's what they never expected: that you'd turn that pain into power, that you'd stop chasing and start choosing, that one day you'd be the one who got away. And today, we're talking about what happens inside their head when they finally see that shift, when the tables turn, when the attention they used to control is now off them and on someone else. So before we break it all down, smash that subscribe button if you're done giving people access to a healed version of you they never helped build. Turn on notifications, because the rest of Volume 5, we're going way deeper into what happens when the avoidant no longer has emotional power over you. And if you're ready to step beyond these weekly videos and get access to deeper breakdowns, real-time Q&As, and exclusive live streams, join the channel membership. Link is in the description below. Now, let's make something crystal clear. This video is not about making your ex jealous. This is not some petty, low-level, let me post my new boo to make them mad type content. This is for the emotionally awakened. This is for the person who stayed loyal to someone unavailable and finally decided to redirect all that love inward. Because the minute you actually move on, not performatively but fully, something profound happens. They see it, they feel it, and for the first time since the breakup, you become a threat. Let me say that again. You become a threat to their comfort, to their ego, to their fantasy that you'd never find better. Because whether they admit it or not, your avoidant ex didn't think you'd make it this far. They thought you'd stay orbiting. They thought you'd stay cracked open, waiting for crumbs. They thought time would soften your boundaries, not sharpen them. But now they're watching someone else make you laugh. They're hearing from mutual friends that you're glowing different. And whether it's through stalking your stories or replaying old memories, they're spiraling. Not because you moved on too fast, but because they assumed you never would. That's the thing about avoidance. They fear closeness, but they crave possession. They don't want to love you, but they don't want anyone else to either. It's psychological whiplash. They didn't break your heart. They broke their own future. And now they're watching you build it without them. So here's what I want you to understand before we dive into these 5 brutal truths. You're not the same person they left. You've done the work. You've grieved the potential. You've stopped chasing closure and started becoming it. That's why today's episode is so important, because there are consequences for ghosting real love. There are repercussions for walking away from someone who was ready to grow. And today we're exposing every emotional storm they go through the moment they see you giving what they fumbled to someone new. Watch until the end, because in key point number 4, I'll be revealing this episode's secret mantra. The first person to drop that mantra in the comments gets pinned. It's not just a game, it's a declaration. It's a power statement to lock in this moment, this version of you, forever. So hit, like if you've ever been ghosted, breadcrumbed, or led on by someone too scared to love properly. Share this with someone still wondering if they should wait for their avoidant ex to come around. And subscribe if you're done being the emotionally available one in an emotionally unavailable situation. And if you're really ready to evolve, join the membership. Because we're not just doing breakup recovery here. We're building emotional warriors, people who don't just survive heartbreak, but use it as rocket fuel. Comment below right now with this week's power affirmation: I don't chase closure, I become it. Say it like a vow. Say it like a contract with your future self. Say it like you mean it, because the version of you that begged, that waited, that cried, that version is gone. You're not just moving on. You've already left. Let's get into it. Stay focused. Thing 1. Their control starts to crumble. Avoidants don't chase control. They manufacture it. The distance, the silence, the I need space conversations followed by hours of scrolling Instagram. That was never random. It was control theater. See, when your avoidant ex left, they didn't just walk away from you. They walked into a fantasy. You'll always be there. Maybe not physically, but emotionally, energetically, spiritually. They assumed you'd stay glued to the possibility of them. And that belief gave them power. Power to delay conversations, power to breadcrumb affection, power to move on without really letting go. They told themselves, I can always come back later. They'll still want me. But then you dated someone else, and suddenly that invisible chain they thought they had wrapped around your soul snaps. You post a picture. You go out smiling. Maybe you don't post anything at all, but word travels. And now they realize you're not hoping. You're not holding your breath. You're not stuck in their emotional maze anymore. You're living. And that is where the panic begins. See, avoidants don't always want you. They want access to you. They want the emotional convenience of knowing they can pop in, flirt a little, throw out a breadcrumb or two, and you'll still be emotionally on call. But now they're facing a reality they never prepared for. You stopped orbiting. And that's where the control collapses. Because avoidants are wired to avoid intimacy, not competition. They struggle with closeness, but they absolutely crack when they're no longer the one holding the emotional upper hand. You dating again changes the entire game. It removes the fantasy that they were irreplaceable. It destroys the delusion that you'd wait forever. And most importantly, it exposes just how replaceable their control actually was. This is where you'll start to see strange behaviors. They might resurface out of nowhere. They might watch your stories obsessively. They might send a vague text like, "Hey, just checking in." Don't get it twisted. That's not affection. That's anxiety masked as casual interest. They're not reaching out because they suddenly found the capacity to love. They're reaching out because they feel the power dynamic slipping, and they're trying to reel it back in. They might not even want you back. They just want to know that you're not gone, because if you're gone, for real, that means they lost something real, and avoidants hate facing loss, especially when they caused it. He who controls others may be powerful, but he who has mastered himself is mightier still. Lao Tzu, you mastering your detachment, you learning to love again without looking back. That's the real shift. That's the emotional upgrade they never saw coming. So let them spiral. Let them wonder. Let them obsess over what you're doing, where you're going, and who you're with. Because the moment their control starts to crumble, your healing becomes unstoppable, and that's only the beginning. Stay locked in, because thing 2 is where it starts to really hurt. For them. Let's keep going. Thing 2, their ego takes a hit. They weren't ready for. Let's be clear, avoidants aren't heartless, they're defended. And one of the biggest walls they build is around their ego, that fragile sense of superiority that whispers, they'll never find better than me. That's not just arrogance, it's insurance. It's how they rationalize leaving someone who actually loved them. Because if they can convince themselves that you'll never level up, that you'll stay stuck, broken, or chasing them, then they don't have to feel guilty. They don't have to reflect. They don't have to own what they did. But then one day, you're smiling in someone else's passenger seat. You're glowing without their attention. You're dating up, not down. And now their ego takes a direct hit, because the entire narrative they've been telling themselves just fell apart. The story where you were the clingy one. The story where they were the one who had to leave to protect their peace. The story where you'd never move on like that. Yeah, that story, dead. And what replaces it is something avoidance can't tolerate. Insecurity. All of a sudden, their inner monologue flips. Wait, was I the problem? Are they happier now? What if they treat that new person better than they ever treated me? The same avoidant who ghosted you without blinking. The same one who said, I just need time to work on myself while texting someone else, is now haunted by your peace. Because let's face it, they expected you to lose. They needed you to lose. Not because they hate you, but because watching you win without them destroys the illusion that they were the prize. And here's the kicker. They don't just hate that you're dating again. They hate that you're dating with power, not trauma, not desperation, not to get over them, but because you actually healed. Now you're selective. Now you're grounded. Now you're not asking, will they love me? You're asking, do they even qualify to access me? And to someone who once believed they had a permanent VIP pass to your life. That's ego death. That's their worst fear realized. They didn't just get over me, they outgrew me. And don't be surprised if this triggers competition mode. They may post thirst traps. They may suddenly be living their best life. They might even start dating someone else just to prove they're over it. But here's the truth most won't say. It's not about you. It's about their wounded ego trying to reassert dominance in a game they already lost. Psychologists call this reactive validation, when someone seeks external affirmation to soothe a bruised identity. But don't fall for the noise, because ego is loud when it's scared, and right now, their ego is screaming. Confidence is silent. Insecurities are loud. Unknown. Your silence speaks louder than any post. Your peace hits harder than any rebound. Your joy, unbothered, authentic, and no longer centered around them, is the ultimate ego check. So while they're scrambling to protect their image, you're building your reality, one that doesn't include chasing people who flinch at real connection. Their ego may not survive this, but you will. Thing 3, that's where the guilt kicks in, and it's brutal. Let's go deeper. Thing 3, guilt creeps in, but they'll never admit it. Let's get something straight. Avoidants don't get a free pass just because they shut down emotionally. They feel guilt, they feel regret, they feel loss. They just bury it. They don't confront their guilt. They outrun it. They don't express their regret. They perform detachment. They don't say, I'm sorry for hurting you. They say, I just wasn't ready. But now you're dating again. You've stepped out of that emotional purgatory they left you in. And whether they admit it or not, the guilt is starting to bleed through, not because they've changed, but because reality finally slapped them in the face. You didn't wait. And when an avoidant realizes that the person who gave them grace, the person who forgave the shutdowns, the mixed signals, the distant behavior, is now giving someone else what they once took for granted, it stings. But here's the part you need to understand. They'll never tell you they feel guilty. That would require vulnerability, and avoidants are terrified of vulnerability, not just with others, but with themselves. So instead, the guilt shows up in subtle sabotage. They might reach out under the pretense of just being friendly. They might bring up old memories, casually, just to keep a thread between you. They might even try to downplay your new relationship, saying something like, "I hope they treat you well." Translation: this is harder than I thought. But here's the secret. That guilt isn't about what they did. It's about who you've become since they did it. Because guilt doesn't kick in when you're broken and begging. Guilt kicks in when you're thriving, when you show the world that what they discarded is now flourishing, when the person they neglected is now desirable, healed, and fully unavailable to them. Now they're forced to sit with the emotional receipts, the message they ignored, the needs they minimized, the connection they never watered, and then blamed you when it withered. And the worst part for them, they know they can't undo it. You gave them your best, they ran from it, and now someone else is experiencing a version of you they helped build by losing. Regret is the most painful form of self-awareness. Unknown. And that's exactly what avoidants try to avoid at all costs, self-awareness. Because if they sit with the guilt too long, they'd have to admit the breakup wasn't your fault. They'd have to admit you were ready, and they weren't. They'd have to admit that the person they claimed was too much was actually just too real for the version of themselves they were willing to be. So they swallow the guilt. They deflect. They distract. They pretend they're unbothered. But behind that facade, there's a storm brewing. You're not the ghost in their past anymore. You're the one who got away and leveled up. That's not just guilt. That's a wound they won't know how to heal because they created it. And trust this, when the guilt hits, they might come back around. They might test the waters. They might even miss you. But don't confuse that for change. Guilt is not growth. And just because they regret losing you doesn't mean they're capable of keeping you. Thing 4? That's where we drop the secret mantra and reveal the real reason they spiral when they know you've moved on for real. Thing 4. Their fantasy of you shatters completely avoidance. Don't stay attached to who you really were. They stay attached to the idea of you, the version that stayed soft no matter how distant they got. The version that would always answer, always wait, always forgive. The version that made them feel safe, without ever demanding they show up fully. That version was a fantasy, a version they could control, a version they could mentally return to, even after leaving, a version that gave them emotional access without accountability. But when they see you dating again, when they realize you've actually moved on, that fantasy collapses. And trust me, they feel it. Because now the story they've been telling themselves to feel okay with what they did. They still love me. They're just hurting. They'd take me back if I really wanted it. That story dies, and avoidants need that story to survive. They need it to soothe the guilt. They need it to justify the avoidance. They need it to sleep at night. But you dating again breaks the illusion, because now you're not just gone. You're gone without longing. You're not hung up. You're not in limbo. You're no longer emotionally available for them to maybe circle back to. And now they're left with the brutal truth. You were never the one who was emotionally weak. They were. You weren't too much. You weren't clingy. You were ready, and they were just too afraid to meet you there. So what happens when the fantasy dies? One of two things: they spiral privately, they won't tell anyone, they'll smile on the outside, maybe even post more, but deep down, they're grieving the version of you they thought they'd always have. They try to revive it. They'll reach out, they'll accidentally react to your stories, they'll test the waters to see if the door is still cracked open. But that's not love. That's disruption. They're not coming back to give. They're coming back to see if their fantasy still holds weight. But here's where everything changes. You don't need to be seen by them anymore. Because you broke the fantasy first. You stopped romanticizing the past. You stopped waiting to be chosen, and that's why you're free. That's why this version of you is the most dangerous, not because you're dating again, but because you're no longer emotionally available for their mind games. You're no longer flinching when they post. You're no longer decoding texts. You're no longer auditioning for love that should have been mutual from the start. You've become what they never expected: unreachable. People don't miss you. They miss the version of themselves that felt safe having access to you. Unknown. And now, for the part you've been waiting for. If you've made it this far, comment this episode's secret mantra below. And if you're the first, you'll get pinned. Their fantasy died. I did not. Let that be your truth, your power, your permission to stay unavailable to anything that requires you to shrink. Because the version of you that made excuses for their avoidance no longer exists, and the one that does is about to finish this list with the most painful truth of all. Thing 5, they feel replaced, and they'll never unsee it. Let's finish strong. Thing 5, they feel replaced, and they'll never unsee it. This is the one they never prepare for. They expect you to cry, they expect you to wait, they expect you to scroll past their posts and feel a pang in your chest. But what they don't expect, to be replaced, not copied, not imitated, replaced, by someone who does what they never had the courage to do: show up consistently, communicate clearly, offer love without making you feel like you're asking for too much. See, your avoidant ex thought time was on their side. They thought silence would keep the bond intact. They thought you'd always come back around eventually. So when they see someone else standing where they used to be, someone else holding the hand they once let go, it hits them harder than any breakup ever could. Because now, it's not just about you moving on, it's about them being forgotten. That special place they assumed they'd always have in your heart. Gone. That invisible pedestal they stood on, believing they were irreplaceable. Shattered. That passive confidence that they could slide back into your life whenever they were finally ready. Demolished. You have to understand, avoidants don't fear losing people. They fear being replaced in a way that proves they were never as unique, never as unforgettable, and never as emotionally powerful as they told themselves they were. And when they see someone else making you laugh, when they notice that your energy has shifted, not to provoke, but because you're genuinely present with someone better, they start replaying everything they took for granted: the loyalty you offered, the effort you gave, the countless second chances you handed over with grace. And now, someone else is reaping the benefits of the love they fumbled. They never thought they'd lose you until they saw someone else win you. Unknown. This is where the deepest pain kicks in. Not because they lost you, but because they can't undo it. They can't rewind the clock. They can't erase the way they made you feel. They can't ask for another chance without facing the reality that they were the problem all along. So what do? They stalk silently. They spiral in private. They compare themselves to the new person, obsessively, because whether they admit it or not, they feel replaced. And that feeling, for someone who built their entire identity around emotional avoidance, is crippling. You became the living proof that they weren't the exception. You became the confirmation that they were never as essential as they believed. And here's the kicker: they'll never unsee it. No matter how much they distract themselves, No matter how many situationships they jump into, no matter how many posts they upload pretending they're happy and healed, you dating again burned an image into their mind they can't erase. And that image, you whole, radiant, loved without them. So if you're still questioning whether moving on was too soon, if you're wondering whether they still care, trust this. They don't miss you. They miss the access to you. And now that access is gone, not out of spite, but because you finally realized they were just a chapter, not your story. You made it through all 5, and now you know, when your avoidant ex sees you dating again, it's not just a moment, it's a reckoning. They feel the shift, they feel the void, they feel the pressure of a reality where you're not there anymore, and someone else is. And deep down, they know they'll never get that version of you back, because it wasn't the dating that changed you. It was the detachment. So if today's episode snapped something awake in you, don't just nod and scroll on. Hit like if you're done being their emotional safety net. Subscribe if you're ready for the next level of transformation. Join the membership if you want to access advanced videos, live Q&As, and get direct responses to your questions. Links in the description. And if you were the first to comment this episode's secret mantra, their fantasy died. I did not. You already know. Check the pinned comments. That crown belongs to you. Now, listen carefully. If this video exposed what happens when you move on physically, then the next one will hit even harder, because in Volume 5, Episode 33, we're diving into the internal spiral they go through when they realize something far scarier than you dating again. You're not the same person anymore. The energy is different. The silence is heavier. The version of you they once understood, gone. Coming up next, the 5 emotional triggers that hit your avoidant ex when they realize you're not the same anymore. And trust me, they feel it all. The regret, the powerlessness, the panic of knowing they can't reach the new you with the old games. You don't want to miss it. Turn on notifications, subscribe, and I'll see you in episode 33. Stay powerful, stay rising, stay unreachable. Let's go.